My dearest Earth brothers and sisters, this is Djizout speaking. My greetings. I am a Pleiadian spiritual teacher. It is good to speak to you. Picture the CEO of an American health insurance company. This man is already rich, and he is earning even more money by having his company reject insurance claims from people who desperately need the insurance payout. Because of this, many people despise this CEO. In fact, Luigi Mangione allegedly shot a CEO who was allegedly like this, and a lot of people are praising Luigi for that. So in other words, people really hate this kind of insurance claim denying CEO. Why is this CEO acting this way? He's not doing it because he needs the money. He's already rich. He's not trying to accumulate wealth in order to get more love. Clearly this isn't making people love him more. If he wanted to become more loved, he'd step down from his position and he'd start some altruistic initiative. His actions aren't maximizing his own happiness. He'd be happier if he didn't work 70 hours per week in a job that made people hate him. For example, he'd be happier if he'd do something meaningful or altruistic, or if he'd spend his time making art or traveling or enjoying concerts or spending time with his family or something like that. So, why is our CEO acting this way? You could say because he's greedy, but that's just sticking a label on something we observe. It's not an explanation. Just because it's labeled doesn't mean we now understand why he's doing what he's doing. Here's what's actually going on. Our CEO is a person inside a biological organism called a human. That might sound a little strange, but basically, the CEO has free will and has the ability to make decisions. However, he's still in a biological organism called a human. Biological organisms are focused on maximizing their reproductive chances. And having a lot of money and status improves one's chances of reproductive success. So basically, this CEO is just being blindly driven around by his biological organism's desire to maximize reproductive chances. He's not following his soul's calling. He's not following his passion. He's not trying to maximize his happiness. He's not trying to be loved. Instead, he's just being blindly driven around by his biological organism's desire to maximize reproductive chances. Of course, the CEO is not literally being mind-controlled. He still has free will. Rather, he's in a biological organism, and one part of that biological organism is what I call the algorithm. This algorithm constantly nudges him into the direction of maximizing his reproductive prospects. How does the algorithm do that? Well, it gives him a brief moment of pleasure when he makes a lot of money. And it causes suffering in him whenever he sees someone else having more money than him, because from a reproductive standpoint that person is a competitor who might be the one ending up with the best partner. This algorithm is an automatic part of the biological organism he's in. It's something unconscious and non-sentient that drives people towards maximizing their chances of reproduction. And in fact, this algorithm can cause suffering in people to nudge them towards reproduction. This algorithm isn't the cause of all suffering, but it's the cause of a surprisingly large amount of suffering. This algorithm is, give the person brief and fleeting pleasure whenever he or she takes a step towards maximizing reproductive chances. Cause suffering whenever there's something unaddressed, in the past or present or future, that could be bad for reproductive chances or for the person's children. Cause suffering whenever others seem more reproductively fit, because then they might end up with the best partner. So, if someone else is prettier or richer or more skilled or more successful than you, then the algorithm may cause suffering in you, because then that other person may end up with the best partner. Note that it doesn't make rational sense for people with average looks to be unhappy about their looks, and to even suffer because of that. Most people have average looks, so why suffer over having average looks? But this does make sense when we understand the algorithm. Also, if you're not secure in your ability to have a house and provide for a family, then that can cause suffering in you, because that's bad for your reproductive chances. The algorithm detects that there's something that's bad for your reproductive chances, hence it makes you suffer to try and get you to fix that. If the society you're in doesn't seem stable or safe, then that can cause suffering in you because that's a bad sign for your ability to raise a family. If other people aren't showing you love regularly, then that's a bad sign for your reproductive chances, and so the algorithm makes you suffer. If there's something in the past or future that's unaddressed and that could hurt your reproductive chances, then the algorithm makes you suffer. Even though rationally speaking it makes no sense to suffer for something that's already passed, or that hasn't happened yet. If you feel an urge to buy a luxury car, that's probably the algorithm nudging you to buy something that signals wealth to prospective mates, etc., etc. Note that trying to achieve happiness by doing what this algorithm wants is a terrible strategy, because there will always be someone prettier, or richer, or higher status, etc. than yourself. So the algorithm will always keep making you suffer. Note that the richest and prettiest people often aren't happy. Here's a second reason why it's very ineffective to try and achieve happiness by trying to do what the algorithm wants. It is, all pleasure you get by doing what the algorithm wants is fleeting. A week after you get a nice new car, you'll no longer feel particularly happy about that, because now the algorithm wants you to take yet another step towards maximizing your reproductive chances. And there will always be something else you can improve to maximize your reproductive chances. This is why people are finding that just chasing success doesn't bring lasting fulfillment. Our CEO is being fooled by this algorithm. This algorithm gives him fleeting pleasure whenever he makes a lot of money, and the algorithm makes him suffer whenever he sees someone else having more money, or whenever he thinks about a possible future in which he has less money. So our CEO tries to make more and more money, thinking that this will one day make him happy. But it won't. Our CEO probably thinks he's maximizing his own happiness. But in reality, he's doing what the algorithm says, and hence he's acting in a way that would maximize his reproductive chances in a Stone Age context. That's why he's so focused on making money, i.e. on being the monkey with the biggest pile of bananas. In this way, the algorithm is controlling him, by making him suffer whenever he doesn't do what it wants, and by giving him only brief pleasure when he does accomplish something the algorithm wants. You could think of the algorithm as an abusive partner, who constantly abuses you but who also constantly promises that if only you do what he says, that you'll finally be happy and safe. But that day never comes. The goalposts keep moving. The abuse never stops, except temporarily when you obey, but then the abuse resumes after a few days. After all, where else did you think thoughts such as I am not good enough or I am unworthy of love or I can't rest, I have to do something useful came from? Probably people haven't been repeatedly telling you you are not good enough or you are not worthy of love or you're not allowed to rest. But the algorithm sure has been telling you that you are not good enough, that you are not worthy of love, that you may not rest. So the algorithm pretends that it is the solution to suffering, when in reality, it's the algorithm itself that is a huge cause of suffering. As I said, the algorithm is like an abusive partner. If the algorithm wasn't there, our CEO would most likely just be innately happy without putting in any effort. Without the algorithm, happiness wouldn't be something he'd need to pursue. It would be something that would just be there, except during times of a huge personal tragedy, a divorce, the death of a family member, a serious illness, etc. After all, peace is your natural state. And the algorithm is a large part of the reason why most people aren't at peace. Now, this makes the algorithm sound very malicious. And that's certainly one valid way of looking at it. However, keep in mind that it's non-sentient. It's just part of the biological organism you're in. Also, another perspective on the algorithm is that without it, Earth humans might have gone extinct long ago. While the algorithm causes a whole lot of suffering and misconceptions in humans, it is, or at least, was, quite effective at getting people to reproduce, which has perpetuated the species. Of course you need to survive in order to reproduce. This is also why sometimes the algorithm pushes people to basically hide and not actively try to find a partner. The Stone Age idea here is, there are wolves out there, or bandits, and if I go out now I might be killed. Better to hide, and perhaps work on building a nice cave, until it's safe again. And because Earth is so unsafe, a lot of people are currently in this mode. Some people have a partner but intentionally don't want kids. Those people might not be listening to the algorithm because they're dedicating their life to some greater cause. Or they may be financially unstable or traumatized or psychologically immature, in which case the algorithm is fine with them taking care of themselves first. Plus the algorithm is from the Stone Age and it doesn't understand contraception, so it thinks that having sex will eventually lead to babies. Still, the algorithm is primarily aimed at reproduction and not at your personal survival. Parents are willing to sacrifice themselves for their children, after all. And the thought of dying peacefully of old age, surrounded by your loving and thriving family, isn't such an unpleasant thought to many people. Plus, if a galactic told you I am going to introduce you to the partner of your dreams, then that would likely make you very happy. Whereas if a galactic told you I am going to give you a health device that will extend your remaining lifespan by 20%, then that wouldn't cause the same amount of happiness, unless you already have an amazing partner. Of course, it's not just the CEO who has this algorithm. Everyone who is in the biological organism called a human has this algorithm. For example, most people will tell you that they understand that happiness comes from within. But then they don't meditate and they don't heal their own psychological wounds. Instead, they spend lots of their available energy on either trying to find a partner or engaging in behavior that makes them more attractive to potential partners. So this contradicts people's stated principle that they understand that happiness comes from within. Yet, this does make sense once we understand the algorithm. After all, having a partner and having children is rewarding and beautiful in and of itself. But also, having a partner also means that the algorithm doesn't torture you as much, because it thinks that you're well on the road to reproduction. Do you see how much people are being controlled by the algorithm? Most people just dedicate their life to doing the thing, finding a partner and having children and making sure their children do well, that causes the algorithm to stop torturing them as much. And that's it. That's all they do with their life. Similarly, so many Earth people like being in victim consciousness because if they tell themselves that they can't succeed because evil white men are oppressing them, or they can't find a partner because people of the other gender are unreasonable, then the algorithm doesn't torture them as much. People's algorithm is powerful, but it's also dumb and non-sentient. Whereas if someone thinks yes, society is tough right now, but I can have the life I want if I just put in enough effort and make the right choices, then the algorithm starts raking that person over the coals. Similarly, most Earth people refuse to see pretty obvious realities that go against the dominant narrative. Why? Because doing so is bad for your reproductive chances. It makes it harder for you to have a relationship with the average person. Therefore, the algorithm causes suffering in the average person whenever he or she thinks about accepting a reality that is commonly labeled as an evil opinion or as a conspiracy theory. Note that this algorithm comes from the Stone Age. An illustration of this is stereotypical caveman-style male behavior, which is clearly counterproductive and people tell men not to do it, yet some men continue to do it. Why? Because those behaviors were effective in the Stone Age, so the algorithm continues to promote them. As another illustration that the algorithm comes from the Stone Age, it rewards you with pleasure when you eat ice cream and pizza. Why? Because in the Stone Age eating such food meant that you weren't going to starve to death next winter. Hence the algorithm gives you pleasure whenever you eat ice cream and pizza, even though in the modern world that's not actually beneficial. Similarly, the algorithm thinks that being on social media is good for you, because it's superficially a bit like socializing with a lot of people. But of course, being from the Stone Age, the algorithm doesn't understand that being on social media in fact isn't good for you. It's not even good purely for your reproductive chances. Similarly, in the Stone Age, dangers were often very concrete and practical. If a week ago a wild boar wounded you, then that causes suffering in you until you or your hunter buddies manage to kill that wild boar. And if you fear that soon there's be no more food in this area, then you experience suffering until you migrate to another area with richer hunting grounds. So in that context, it makes sense to have an algorithm that causes suffering until you address things that are bad for your reproductive chances. After all, in the Stone Age those things were very concrete and practical and they could be solved in a straightforward way. But in today's context, the dangers are so subtle and prevalent and widespread and uncontrollable for the individual that it's counterproductive to be so anxious about them. Yet, people feel anxious about national or global processes they have practically zero control over, because the algorithm comes from the Stone Age, and it makes people suffer until those things are fixed. Hence people get so angry and upset and hostile about politics, far beyond what would be rational. Why? Because the algorithm is telling them if that other party is in power, that's bad for your reproductive chances. Go fix that, or at least go virtue signal to your own side in order to attract a mate. But of course, as an individual you can't just fix the problem of that other bad political party being in power, or potentially getting into power. It's a national process that you have almost no control over. It's not a wild boar that you can just kill. So the algorithm tries to maximize your reproductive chances, and it was pretty effective at that in the Stone Age. But in the modern era, the algorithm often makes people so excessively anxious and depressed that it's not even good for people's reproductive chances anymore. Fortunately, ultimately you are in control of your actions, and the algorithm isn't. You have free will, and the algorithm doesn't. The algorithm has probably been successfully manipulating you, because you were unaware of it and so you let it. The most effective control is the kind you don't see, after all. However, now you know. Now you can just consciously consider the pros and cons of following the algorithm, and then make a conscious choice if you want to keep doing what the algorithm says. The algorithm can only control you if you let it. You can just look the algorithm straight in the eyes and think I am not affected by the algorithm. And you might find that this simply dissolves the anxiety that was plaguing you just moments before. So, let's make this practical. Let's say a painful thought or emotion arises in you. One shorthand way of dealing with this is just to think I am not affected by the algorithm. And then just go on with your day. An alternative shorthand way of dealing with this is to think, oh hey, there's the old algorithm again. Make a joke out of it, perhaps chuckle a bit to yourself, and go on with your day. Or a more extensive way of dealing with it is to answer the following questions in your mind. 1. Do I want the algorithm to control me, via suffering and via fleeting moments of pleasure? 2. Do I want to focus my life on maximizing my reproductive chances, as the algorithm wants me to do? 3. Is this Stone Age algorithm even good at maximizing my reproductive chances in this modern era? 4. Do I think that obeying the algorithm, and thereby constantly working to improve my reproductive chances, is an effective path towards lasting happiness? After you've answered these questions, you can think I am not affected by the algorithm. And then see if you want to take some action to meet your needs. For example, you could speak loving words to your inner child. Or you could take some practical action. Whatever is appropriate in that situation. And that's it. It's possible that this doesn't yet work. In that case, just continue your spiritual practice, and perhaps come back to this message 6 months from now. Finally, you also have a soul, and it is always inviting you to take positive actions. And your soul can make you feel not entirely satisfied with a purely conventional life. You could metaphorically see your soul as the angel on your shoulder, whereas the algorithm is the metaphorical devil on your other shoulder. They're not literally angels or devils, however your soul versus the algorithm is sort of analogous to the angel versus the devil on your shoulder. Similarly, when people say choose love over fear, that is sort of analogous to someone saying listen to your soul, rather than listening to the algorithm. I hope this was helpful. And I hope that once you understand this, you can let go of a whole lot of suffering. With love. This was Djizout.